questions for this part.
Okay, these were the questions. Thank you for your questions. We will now continue with the last part of our lecture of today. And that is about recognizing of the idea of cyclicity and reincarnation in philosophy and science. If we look for reincarnation in philosophy, we will certainly end up with the Greek philosopher Plato and his so-called dialogues. In the literature of Plato, especially a dialogue called the Phaedon, we find an interesting argument by way of Socrates about the so-called pairs of opposites. Socrates states the following, that for each pair of opposites, one can see that each opposite has the possibility of turning into its opposite. In every pair of opposites there are transitional forms that prove this. For example, if you have hot and cold, then there are transitional forms like cooling down and heating up, which makes that these opposites become their opposites. And with those pair of opposites, it can be observed that they always indicate the state of something. Something is cold or something is warm. And that something passes from one state into another. Then, next, Socrates reasons that every pair of opposites fits this description. And then he asks his students whether this is also valid for the pair of opposites of life and death. And they come to the conclusion that there can be no exception, that this is also valid for the pair of opposites of life and death. So, then Socrates reasons that from life one comes into death, and logically from death one thus comes into life through reincarnation. So that is a very well-known line of reasoning that you may find in the philosophy of Plato. Then, recognizing cyclicity in science. An interesting approach in science is one based on analogies. In nature you can see the cyclicity everywhere. I mentioned that already earlier in the lecture. You see day and night, winter and summer, waking and sleeping and so. And with respect to waking and sleeping, where were you when you slept? We will go into that in the lecture of 2 weeks from now. You see also the phenomena of cyclicity in cultures. If you look at history, you see, as it were, cyclical patterns. For example, look back about 200 years ago, the Roman period. Not according to the outside form, but according to the characteristics of the consciousness of the people. Then certain comparisons come to mind. For example, consider the place of sports in life and how we deal with it now. You can see the parallels between the stadiums then and now. For instance, then in the Roman time, the gladiators in the arenas. And now, bijvoorbeeld, the sportsmen and sportswomen in the Olympic Games, such as in the Greek times. Another phenomena in science, which has been studied very well, is the phenomena into near-death experiences. The necessary scientific research has been carried out over the last 40 years. What are that exactly, near-death experiences? It is the experience of being out of your body. And experience being in a tunnel and seeing a lot of light. In the US, this has been studied by Dr. Moody, who states that some 8 million Americans or more have had such a near-death experience. In the Netherlands, the cardiologist Pim van Lommel conducted many years of research into this field. He examined 344 adults who suffered cardiac arrest and survived, with all of them breathing and circulation stopped and there was no brain activity. But all patients were resuscitated. 80% of them had gone through a unique experience, as Moody had also recorded. And after a period of 2 years, and then also after 8 years, it was found with these people that the experience were still very, very, very vivid in their minds. And I will give you one typical example that he describes in his book Boundless Consciousness. He explains that one of the patients told that there was a nurse who removed someone's dentures just before resuscitation. And afterwards the patient can say exactly where the nurse placed these dentures. And that was a little bit funny because this person was completely not awake, of course. Well, there are many of these examples in his book. And the conclusion that Van Lommel has drawn from all these interviews and investigation was that the human consciousness in this situation is not localized in the brain, but is located outside the brain. And in December 2001, Van Lommel published his research in the medical magazine The Lancet. And up to today he is traveling around the globe to give presentations on his research, and many people are really taking an interest to hear his research facts. Then I want briefly to mention also the investigations by Professor Ian Stevenson. He died a few years back, but he is followed up by Jim Tucker of the University of Virginia. And Stevenson and his successor did a lot of research after cases of the reincarnation type, as it is called. And they are about the cases of very young children having memories of a past life. About 2,600 cases and even more were very well documented and very well researched. And these young children started talking about their previous life in the age between 2 and 4 years old. In many cases, the reincarnation would have taken place within a few years of the previous death. And most of the time, this previous death was that they had died prematurely in their previous life through violence or other cases of a sudden death. And in a large number of those cases it could be verified by family and bystanders or by examining medical and historical data, like for instance police station reports and so on. In most of the cases, after the age of 5, 6, 7 or 8 years, the children stopped telling these stories because they were, let's say, taken in their present life, and these stories went back in their memory. But I will briefly tell you about the findings of Stevenson's investigations. First, about the personality of people, especially character traits, habit patterns and preferences for certain type of food were very remarkable, and they all corresponded to that in previous incarnations. For example, people who had references to being Japanese soldiers killed in Burma during World War II were supposed to be reincarnated in Burma. They had distinctly Japanese customs, like a very strict discipline, very hard working, and a preference for sweet dishes. We also see that more than 30% of the people had phobias regarding to the risk of death. For instance, if they died in their previous life due to gunfire of an airplane, they were always afraid when planes were flying over and so on. With respect to the findings about body characteristics, there were in many cases certain types of birthmarks, often scar-like, and birth defects that appear to be related to wounds in the previous body. So also that was very remarkable. Well, so far some impressions about the rebirths of young children and their remembrances of a previous life in a very recent incarnation. I would like to summarize now what we have been speaking about today, and that is that we can discover the truth about reincarnation ourselves by growing in consciousness from faith and trust to direct realization of truth, using the perspectives of science, philosophy and religion. And key questions are: is something logical, is it universal, and is it ethical? In religion, the reincarnation idea can be found in, amongst others, the 5 major religious traditions that we know of, namely Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism. In philosophy, we see the concept of reincarnation, amongst others, in the dialogues of Plato, is the outcome of a logical reasoning on the pair of opposites. And in science, you can find a number of starting points to substantiate the idea of reincarnation. For instance, looking at the research into near-death experiences and the proven reincarnations of children. Well, this is a summary of the lecture of today. We will now have again a 3 minutes break for your last question on this theme. See you later. Welcome back.
I've got 2 questions up till now. First question is that children learn very quickly in the eyes of the one who asks the question, and that could be explained by reincarnation. Why do we adults have often more difficulty to learn?
Well, the question is whether it is true that we as adults have more difficulty in learning. I think when children grow up, it depends very much how they grow up. And indeed, in the first years when they first become, after the first 2 years, become really again a self-conscious thinking human being, they learn quickly because they follow, let's say, the path of their previous incarnation, so it goes very quickly because it is in fact a recapitulation process. But you could wonder whether or not we could maintain this space of evolution or development, not even when we grow older, if we do it in the correct way. Because we are all, I put it a little bit negatively, pushed through a certain education system, and whether this schooling or education system is really working all the time with the talents and the potentialities that are in the child present, whether they are brought out or not, is a very serious question. You can wonder whether we do that in the correct way and whether there is not very much room for improvement there, which we also could use as a way of developing the autonomous thinking of children and also of adults by approaching it in a different way. How to use the wisdom that is present potentially in every human being. And I'm saying that because if you look at the basics of Theosophy, I've shown you the three fundamental propositions of the secret doctrine, and that says that the inner core, our deepest core, is in fact the boundless life. We have all the faculties in ourselves, and the only thing we have to do is to evolve these faculties. And a very famous example is given in the dialogues of Plato, where he is describing that there is, I think it is a slave, but that is not really the essence of it, but there is a, let's say, a very uneducated human being in this story that is guided by, I think it is Socrates, by asking this slave certain questions, and by letting this person giving answers from the best of his knowledge, and that actually the end of the story is that this uneducated person is able to solve a fundamental mathematical problem just using his own latent wisdom. And that means that we have, and that is also why Plato says that learning is in fact remembering our wisdom. So there is a high potential in all of us, starting from our youth, as being a child. If we are guided in the right way by teachers, then our sleeping wisdom, our latent wisdom, can be awoken, so to speak. And if we learn that from a very young age, then of course you can expect that we will be able to continue with that if we are confident and relying on our own wisdom already from a young age, and we will continue with that if we become adults. So this is all a matter of the right guidance, the right teachers, the right educational system or way of educating young people to become adults, and then continue this use and this development of this inner wisdom also when you are an adult. So now we see those differences that the one who asked the question said, the young people learn quickly and then it stabilizes or it's going in more lower pace. But I think this is all a matter of how you mobilize or awake the potentialities of the conscious and the wisdom that we have in ourselves. If you do that in the proper way, then in one life it will be one steep development, so to speak, and it does not go like this or go down. It's going up, up, up. And I think that is what we should strive for, and there is still a lot to do to improve that, I think, in our society. So I would say that it is not necessary that there is a difference, and yes, there is an explanation based on the idea of reincarnation that young children develop very quickly, but the quick development can be continued also when you are an adult if you have learned how to mobilize your inner wisdom. You will be able to rely more on what you have learned already in your previous lives, and you will be able to develop more of the potential that you have not developed so far in your previous life.
Thanks. I think we're going to our last question now. Earlier, there was a question about why humans cannot reincarnate as an animal.
Yeah.
Now there is a question about, but what about people who have disabilities?
Yeah.
Thinking mental disabilities or physical disabilities.
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah. Well, these people are humans, human beings, and they have shown certain causes in their previous life, so that there has been built up a disharmony in their nature. And that means, for instance, that they have a physical disability, like for instance the famous scientist Stephen Hawking had a disease, so that in the end he could only speak via a speech computer, but his mind was as clear as always, so he had a physical disability, and he had done something in his previous life that caused this disharmony in his physical nature. And there are also people who have a physical healthy nature, they have a good functioning body, but they have a mental disability. So there has been a cause in a previous life that has caused that they had a mental disability in this life. But this life is only one of the many lives in which they are all human beings, and this one life with this mental disability is the life where something has to be learned by this human being in order to be more harmonic in the next lives, so that there will not be a mental disharmony anymore, so they will be fully harmonic human beings again, and will be able to work with their mind as we are all now more or less harmonic using our mind. So it is a snapshot of one life where this disharmony is taking an important place in the life of this human being, and is very dominant in its impact, but nevertheless it is only one life of the many lives, many previous lives and the many future lives to come. And it is nature works in such a way, via the law of karma, that this is working out in such a way that it is in the end restoring the harmony in the nature of these human beings, so that in the future they have learned a lesson. For instance, and I'm going to talk about that 2 weeks from now, after they die, they have a look back via the so-called panoramic visions. They have a very high, even the people who are mentally disabled, they have from a higher part in their nature a look back at their last life, and they see why, they see the justice, why they had this mental disability caused in their previous life, and why they should learn the lesson that they should behave differently in their next lives in order to prevent to become mentally disabled again. So nature has processes that work in such a way that we can learn continuously to be able to steer our next lives in such a way that we become more and more harmonic. And this doesn't occur again then. Yeah?
Thank you. Last check. Oh, these were the questions for
These were the
tonight.
questions. Thank you very much for your questions. Next week we will have a study on the theme of the lecture of today. And if you, I invite you very much to participate in this study and continue with asking questions, although I will put forward some questions as well myself. If you want to participate, then you can send an email on our website. You can push a button and then you will receive an invitation for the Zoom session of next week, Sunday evening. And you will also find some links where you can download a few pieces of text you can study beforehand. And then we will see each other next week during the study. 2 weeks from now we will continue with the next theme. It's called Learning Processes During Sleep and Death. So that's 2 weeks from now on Sunday 26th of November. But hopefully we will see each other next week in the Zoom session on the theme of the lecture of today. I will now close our evening lecture with the Gayatri from the Rig Veda, and it runs like this. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.